The Holy Gospel for the 22nd Sunday in the season of Pentecost is recorded in the 20th chapter of the Gospel according to St. Luke.
Glory to you, O Lord.
There came to Jesus some Sadducees, those who denied that there is a resurrection. And they asked him a question, saying, Teacher, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies, having a wife but no children, the man must take the widow and raise up offspring for his brother. Now there were 7 brothers. The first took a wife and died without children, and the second and the third took her, and likewise all 7 left no children and died. Afterward, the woman also died. In the resurrection, therefore, whose wife will the woman be? For the 7 had her as wife. And Jesus said to them, the sons of this age marry, and are given in marriage. But those who are considered worthy to attain to that age and to the resurrection from the dead, neither marry nor are given in marriage, for they cannot die anymore, because they are equal to angels and are sons of God, being sons of the resurrection. But that the dead are raised, even Moses showed in the passage about the bush, where he calls the Lord the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. Now, he is not God of the dead, but of the living, for all live to him. Then some of the scribes answered, Teacher, you have spoken well, for they no longer dared to ask him any questions. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Peace be with you.
And also with you.
I'm really happy to be here in front of you, and I'm thankful that you have given me that opportunity to speak with you and to share with you. And my sermon today will be more based on Exodus scripture, on the Old Testament, because that kind of was speaking to me. There, in this scripture, we talk about, or there is written about God, and when we are talking about God, and I assume that we all know about whom we are talking. We are talking about God, about whom we will read in the Bible. In Estonia, I have asked pretty often a question, or some people have been kind of amazed when they got to know that I am Christian. So do you really believe that old man with white beard sitting on the edge of a cloud and is dangles his heads there? Now do you really believe that this kind of old man can be a God who is helping you in every situation, and to whom you can trust your life, or put your life in his hands? In Estonia, as we have gone through, as your pastor already was telling you a little bit, we have gone through the difficult times when we were occupied by Russia in 1940, and we experienced 50 years of occupation. That was really aggressive, atheistic occupation. And they tried to do everything that they were able to wipe out Christianity from Estonia. And their effort was really to get to the people, to keep for people understanding that God is just like a human being. When those people who have asked to me that you really believe that kind of God, white-bearded old man, and when I say that I never pictured God, I never have thought about God like a person, like a human, or I haven't made any kind of picture about God in my mind. So, but if those people think about God like a human, so that's the problem. Because if there in our minds God is like a human, looks like a human, then that's not God anymore. Human is not able to help us in our life situations. Just human is not able to give us hope if like everything is lost. Only God is able to give us hope in every situation that we may face in our lives. So I have to confess that the Soviet occupation time, those authorities, they kind of managed pretty well to put into heads or minds of people that God is just like a human. And then why we should trust him. And another problem is that then if we are thinking about God like a kind of picture, making a picture about God, and pretty often we will make the picture maybe like myself, or like I would like to God to be. But pretty often, actually, God is not like we would like him to be. God is God. We can't make God looking like ourselves or like our wishes. What happens then God really will follow every people's wish and will become like a I don't know, like a person or who is doing what we want him to do. That's not God anymore. But there is a story about Moses. And this is kind of a beginning for those important actions that Moses will be achieving or taking into his shoulders. And when there is a God in a burning bush, and then God says that I am God of your father, of Abraham, of Isaac, of Jacob. Then Moses knows right away who is the God. Because his parents, his grandparents, they were talking to him about their God. He knew that, with whom he's speaking to. But in my country, that's the problem. Because if 50 years in our history was cut when parents, grandparents, they didn't talk to their children about their faith because they were afraid. They might have been fired from jobs if children went to school and say, my parents are believers, they are talking about faith. Or they may get in other ways into trouble. That's why they were afraid. They didn't talk about that. Nowadays, when we would say to people in Estonia that this is God of your parents, of your grandparents, they will ask that, who? But who is God of my parents or grandparents? They didn't have any God. We don't know about that. And this is really a privilege that you have experienced here as well. Throughout those decades, throughout those centuries, that you have been able to share with your children, with your grandchildren, about your God. And I encourage you really to do that. Because otherwise it will happen that one day your grandchild is coming to you and you are talking about God and he or she is asking that, God, who? I don't know who is God. Who is my God? I was already also a month ago here in the States. At the time I was in Omaha. And in Omaha I was preaching also in one church there. And there was also a children's sermon. And the pastor was asking children that who has been talking to you about Jesus? And one small boy said, hundreds of people. It kind of touched my heart when I'm thinking about Estonia and about children in Estonia, especially during those years of occupation. If you would ask the same question there, they would answer nobody. That means those generations, they have been spiritual orphans. I am happy myself that I am raised in Christian family. And I have known Jesus as long as I know. And I have made my decision to become a pastor already when I was in elementary school. I remember when my teacher was asking, I was in 3rd or 4th grade, and the teacher was asking to every student to write down who he or she would like to be in the future. Then I was writing already that I would like to be a pastor. I didn't change my mind later on, and I am a pastor. So, but this is, I said that this is my privilege to be a Christian, to be raised as a Christian since my birth. In thinking about those sufferings that Christians actually had during those 50 years, then you may say that this is not a privilege. This is a big trouble to be a Christian. Because my grandfather, who was pastor already before World War II, and when Russians occupied us, then they prohibited for pastors to organize any youth work in the church. Because that was, according to their mind, it was wrong to teach young people in that kind of mindset. They needed them to teach themselves about communistic ideology and so on. And that was prohibited. But my grandfather didn't follow those rules. He continued to organize youth work in the church, and that was the reason why he was arrested for 8 years and then spent 8 years of his life in a slave labor camp in Siberia. And here in your library actually is the book, We Shall Live in Heaven, that is written by my grandfather about here in your library. Yes, it's in English. And my grandfather's book, written about his journey to Siberia, for about these 8 years. He wrote the book. And also you got those handouts. There is a website, PATEST.org. From the website you can find this book also as a digital book. That's in PDF and ebook and Kindle version are there free of charge to download. So that gives you if you read that, that gives you even better, much better understanding about those years that what we were experiencing there. And at the time when my grandfather was arrested, and he was in Siberia, later on the rest of his family was under deportation. During World War II and after World War II, tens of thousands of Estonians were deported to Siberia, just because whether they were Christians or whatever reasons. So just soldiers came to your door, said you have 1 hour to pack, and you can take with you only what you can carry. And that's it. Everything else will be taken. And so my father with his family were under deportation as well, but they escaped. And because of that, my father hid with his mother and older brother 6 years in the forest. And 4 years they were living in the bunker underground. And so, thinking about all of that, we may say that being a Christian, that's not a privilege. That's a big trouble. But this is something very special if in these situations, experiencing that, you can still confess that being a Christian is not a trouble, but this is a privilege. Because you know, God is not just present when we have a good time, but God is present always, in and everywhere. And this is the thing that we have to know, and that our children and grandchildren have to know. And I ask you and pray for you that you don't make that mistake, that you don't share your faith with your children and grandchildren. Because you will take off that hope from them. You will leave them without hope. And my father said if they were there in the bunker, there were some times when my father was really standing on the edge of the life and death. They didn't have any opportunity to get any medical help. They were in hunger. If they had most difficult moments, they started to sing praise songs, praising the Lord for those sufferings. And that helped. God was with them there, in the bunker. Where you may think that I have nothing. I am like nobody. I'm like not a human. But the only thing that gives you encouragement, that gives you energy, that gives you meaning of life is that you know that you have God with you. And you know that this is kind of my father or my mother or my grandmother or my grandfather. He has taken care of them and will take care of me as well. You know the story about Moses and about Israel. What happened with them? So they were really able to leave Egypt. They were happy. Now they were free. They were able to leave from the slavery. But when they got into trouble, when they were already standing in front of the sea, and they knew that armies of Pharaoh are following them, and they started to blame Moses already. We rather would die in Egypt, being slaves there. But now we are dying here in front of the sea, and those Pharaoh soldiers will kill us. Miracle happened because God kept his promise. And during those 40 years, many, many miracles happened. But what happened with them, why that was taking so long to go to the promised land, to Canaan? Why it was taking 40 years? Because they were in one moment untrustful to God. When Moses sent out 12 men to explore Canaan, is that proper pronunciation? Canaan? To explore Canaan, they came back and they were in fear. Only 2 men, Caleb and Joshua, said, God promised us to give that land. We will warn those people there. Let's go. But the rest of the people, they didn't trust Lord. And that was the reason why they were wandering for so long. And no one of them who didn't trust Lord didn't see the promised land. They died on this trip, on this path. What it tells to us today, are we as a Joshua and Caleb who trust Lord? Or are we like the others who are not trusting him? That's the question for myself as well. If you read from these bulletins, there is written about Humohu. That is an initiative that I really took on into my shoulders. About a year and a half ago, we started a project to establish a Christian outreach center in Estonia called Humohu. Because we have seen during those years when this Tata Academy of Theology was founded already in 1992, we have seen during those years teaching students and preparing them for a church work that actually we need a center where we are able to gather different Christian organizations, to bring them together, to work together this way to save human resources that are kind of limited and also financial resources. And from this kind of setting, we are able to create something absolutely new that we even won't be able to imagine that it would mean for this country. And this is just, I was following God's footsteps, the signs, God's signs. I tried to be not to be walking on my path, but I tried to follow God's signs. And this all has happened, that now, year and a half later, when we started actually in the end of April, this project, with just $100 that I put in myself as a mustard seed money, today we have this Christian Outreach Center, Humohu. We are owners of that, as we raised a little bit more than 500,000 in a year and 4 months. And that was an opportunity that we were able to take a loan for the rest. And December 2nd, we will open that center. This is a unique center in Estonia. We do not have anything like that. And Now, I have taken that risk, just trusting the Lord and thinking about Israelites and about Joshua especially as well. That when later on, when they were already reaching close, we were very close to the promised land, and there was a Jordan on their path. And then God said to Joshua that floods of Jordan won't stop before the heads or toes of the priests who are carrying the ark will touch the border of Jordan. You have to go, you have to move, you have to go and to move to the Jordan. Once you are there, you will see the miracle. The miracle happened. But first, they needed to trust Lord and to step in. And that's the same that I have done. I've stepped in, and now there is a critical moment for myself that we have a little 1.3 million for 5 years, and if we won't be able to meet those needs, then I will be in trouble myself. But this is a physical or material trouble. But I'm happy that I have a God who is much, much more powerful, and who is not just for material things, not just for physical things, but who is taking care of me every day, and to whom I can trust. And that's my strength. That's my encouragement. And that was encouragement of Moses as well, and Joshua, that they were taking that trip or that journey, and finally they arrived to the promised land. I pray that you would arrive to the promised land as well in your life. And I ask your intercessory prayers for me as well, that I could see that happen as well, that God has promised. But we need much prayers, we need much trust, and we need to know that God is almighty. God is not humanly person. God's power is not existing only in this life,